I'm Heather Smith and welcome to Cloud Stories, a podcast exploring the accounting and business apps community. Stay up to date with the curated content I'm sharing by signing up to the Accounting Apps newsletter, available at heathersmithau.com. Today, Daniel Kniaz, CEO and founder of DiviPay, joined me. What I need you to know is there's some building work going on in the background of the audio. I've checked and I don't think it's too distracting, and Daniel's voice is loud. I hope that's okay for you, the listener. Let me share with you some highlights of the interview. Daniel built a lot of his entrepreneurial and startup skills and base knowledge of fintech while working in the Westpac innovation team. He left due to the slight frustration of what they built never made it to market, and they felt, they being his other future co-founder of DiviPay, they felt they could move faster and learn a lot going out on their own. Daniel shares the journey of DiviPay and how it works. It's always been about virtual cards, though they needed to pivot several times to solve the pain points of SMBs and meet the demands of paying consumers. We have an interesting conversation exploring the accounting and startup relationship and how accountants need to communicate their values to startups who don't have a lot of money to ensure they are embraced. I also want to mention I have a strategic partnership and work with the team at DiviPay. You can read more about that if you visit the link endorsementdisclosure.com. This relationship does not influence my comments during the interview. Hope you enjoy the interview. Hey, Daniel, thank you so much for joining me here today on Cloud Stories. So I'm going to start with an icebreaker question, which I believe that you are an expert at. What makes a good sock for the modern man?
I would say it is all around comfort and breathability. Has to be breathable. Don't want those feet getting sweaty.
So what material are we going for?
I think it's going to be cotton with maybe a slight nylon blend.
Oh, okay. That's interesting. I thought you were going to go and say bamboo then. So for people listening in, I believe in your earlier life you actually ran a sock company.
I did. Yeah, it's a funny one. When I was a little bit younger, I started getting the, entrepreneur bug and wanted to start my own thing. Wanted to learn about selling and building brand. And I think fashion is often one of the easiest things to get into. So I wanted to do that, but I wanted to do something, a little different, a little more niche than T-shirts, what a lot of people do. Socks were an underrated item of clothing. Just was kind of a way to sink my teeth in early on the world of business and learning how to build a brand and sell a product.
Excellent. Yeah, look, it is a really good way to do something like that. And it does seem that the serial entrepreneur starts with one and then another and slowly grows through. There's no better education than actually doing it rather than spending a lot of time at college, etc. So can you share with our listeners a little bit about your background?
Sure. So I did a double degree in both business and psychology. Once I graduated, I then went into the workforce where I worked at Deloitte for about a year and a half as a consultant. After that, I actually moved overseas. So I moved to California, lived in the US for a couple of years, really just working odd jobs, enjoying myself there. And that's where I started, hanging around with a group of people who were all working on their own projects, doing incredible things at a really young age. So that's essentially what inspired me to go, I want to start my own thing. So when I came back to Australia, before fully committing to working on my own projects, I knew I needed some savings, needed to make a little bit of money first. So I actually went and took a job at Westpac and worked there for about a year and a half. And it was after that time that started DiviPay.
Excellent. It's do a lot of people go to the US and study from Australia? I thought that the US was extraordinarily expensive to study in.
It is, but the trick is, as a Australian university student, you can actually go, they've got great exchange programs. So you can actually go to the US and pay your Australian tuition. So you get access to studying there, but with an Australian fee. So
Wow.
yeah, it's a little hack that a lot of people are taking advantage of more and more now.
Wow, that is the hack to know about. I know that my daughter has done exchanges to Nepal and to Korea, but I'm not sure if she even knew about the US. That would have been a very good one to have a go at. So you're the CEO of DiviPay. Can you share with our listeners what brought you to this point? You sort of talked about the inspiration for actually starting a company. Why DiviPay? And if you can explain to us, what brought you to this point with DiviPay?
Sure. So I guess it all probably started by working at Westpac, and that's where I actually met my co-founder. So I am non-technical. My co-founder is very much the technical side of the business. And we met at Westpac working in the innovation team there. So really our remit was, how do we take potentially disruptive financial technology and apply that to the bank? So within that framework, we essentially built a lot of skills that are required when you start your own business. Identifying the problem, talking to customers, doing rapid prototypes, building MVPs. So we learned a lot of skills there together working in that team. And ultimately, we left because there was a slight frustration working for a large corporation. A lot of what we did, what we built, it never really made it into market. So we kind of saw the opportunity and said, look, if we step out and do something on our own, we can move a lot faster and we'll learn a lot as well. So that was kind of the genesis of why we left corporate and moved into fintech, and just because we had a base knowledge on fintech. In terms of then the story of DiviPay, it's definitely been a journey with lots of ups and downs. The idea, it really came from listening to our customers. I think what a lot of people probably don't know is DiviPay is actually on its third iteration. So when we started the business a few years back, we actually began with a consumer-facing product, so B2C product. And over time, we pivoted from what was originally a shared payments app, or think of it like a bill splitting application. We pivoted from that to another B2C app, which was centered all around protecting a consumer's privacy and security while shopping online. So we would essentially issue a virtual card for each online payment, kind of like a proxy to your regular bank card. So we've always worked with virtual cards and payments. But ultimately, what happened through that journey is, whilst we scaled that product relatively well, we found it very, very difficult to monetize. You could say we definitely found out the hard way that consumers want everything for free, particularly when it comes to financial services. So that was, I guess, the second pivot or persevere moment where we really had to look at our business and look at, what was the viability of this business. And by talking to customers, we essentially learned that, they loved our product. They can see how it could actually be applicable to their own small businesses. And that's where we started to dive in and really understand, I guess, the pain points that small business have, and then how we could pivot the technology that we've built to really help the SMB instead.
Yeah, that's interesting. I think Rod Drury said something similar to you in that the first layer of mass market that will buy is small business, because consumers don't expect to pay for a lot of things.
Exactly right. Right.
So with that, explain to our listeners what DiviPay currently is and what it does, if you can.
Sure. Yeah. So DiviPay is essentially an all-in-one spend management tool that helps SMEs instantly issue virtual corporate cards, pay bills, control spending, and automate their expense reporting. And if I go back to those early conversations around what the problem space is that we heard from customers, is very difficult for SMEs to get access to a traditional corporate card from a bank. And instead, they would really have one of two different workarounds available to them. Workaround one would be requiring team members or staff to use their own personal cards and then submit an expense report. And then the second workaround that is really, really common would be a single card, a director's card, the founder's card that would get shared around an office. And both of these come with a number of inefficiencies, whether it's fraud and wasteful spending from sharing a card around. And we've heard examples where teams have photocopied cards. They've got them saved on shared drives. Everyone has access. No one knows who's spending on what. And then the other kind of major pain when you require staff to spend their own money is talking to customers. It's really interesting. You never actually know any individual's personal financial situation. So we would hear countless stories of team members literally having to put thousands of dollars of company spending on their own personal cards. And in some instances, actually incur interest on behalf of the business before they got paid back. So there's a number of pain points there, and the DiviPay product essentially helps solve all those issues.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, and it is interesting if you read forums, etc. People do find a lot of pain having to purchase on behalf of the business. Even sort of $50 for some people can be quite a stretch for them. And their personal financial situation is, of course, their business. And it is a really big onus to put that requirement on them, to expect them to actually make that payment. So DiviPay does take that off them, and I've used it myself, and I really like the actual ability to create cards separately for different people, issue it. It all happens quite instantaneously, which was nice that it happened that fast, and then send it out to those particular people. And I noticed from your LinkedIn profile, you actually put up a post saying that at Christmas, that would have been Christmas 2020, Xero issued 800 DiviPay cards to their staff all around Australia as they'd stopped celebrations. It just gave them an opportunity to go and spend money at a small business. And that's just a really simple way to actually issue that for that many staff, and especially in this sort of remote work that we're having to do due to COVID. So it is quite an interesting concept.
Yeah, and I think that's where I think that's where the virtual card really comes in to its own. The fact that it is an instant thing. So with Xero, I think there was a great campaign, COVID, meaning we could no longer celebrate, no longer have a Christmas party. How can I instantly give my team members access to money to then go and spend at small business? And the virtual card means I can instantly set a card up, create a budget, and then within a few seconds, that team member has a notification on their phone. Here's $100 to go and spend. I think it's really powerful because of that instant nature with the virtual card.
Yeah, it is. And for those listening in, it does physically look, when it gets on your phone, it looks like all of your other cards there. It looks exactly like your other cards there, which is kind of interesting. So where did the name DiviPay come from?
Yeah, so I guess it goes back to the genesis of V1 DiviPay, which was all around splitting payments or dividing payments. So hence DiviPay, and the name is kind of stuck because there's a lot of admin to change everything that goes with the name. So we're trying to fit it in with the new business. But I think what works well is people often, business owners often talk about, I need to divvy up cash to my team members to go and spend. So fortunately enough, it's actually continued to work for us over these multiple iterations.
Yeah, no, it does make sense, and it's a good lesson for people out there, because I'm not sure if you're aware of it, but the turmoil that people went when Receipt Bank became Dext, and it's like, wow, people's minds just exploded. And I still have people contacting me saying, "Where is it on my mobile phone? I can't find it. What is the new name?" So, but c'est la vie. So I recently heard you did a talk with Meryl Johnson of Bean Ninjas. We all love Meryl Johnson here. And in it you said that as a startup, you didn't see the value in engaging an accountant initially, which was brutally honest, and I completely hear you on that. So for the accountants out there who do want to and love working with startups, how can they make that work for the new startup? How can the accountant make it work for you being a new startup? Is it equity in return for services? Is it fees spread out over a period? Is there something else that they can do?
It's a really good question, because whilst that's what we did at the time, I definitely regret not working with an accountant sooner.
The accountants are now all cheering.
Yeah, definitely one of the big lessons. And I think, like, going back to my frame of mind at the time, the reason is you've got a very small, finite amount of money, and there is an opportunity cost to absolutely everything. When at this point in time, you're just fighting for survival and you're trying to find product market fit. So any dollar that I spend over here, you're always doing this cost benefit analysis of, well, what if I put it over here to kind of further the business? In hindsight, we paid for that a little bit later on when the systems weren't set up properly from day one. When I think about, again, why I viewed it in that way at that time, well, one was obviously inexperience, but the other one was no one really sat me down and told me what the consequence of that would be. So I think, if I was a little bit more educated on this is what's coming, this is why this is so important for you to do today, that probably would have solved me. I then think about this really interesting concept around how do you engage startups who don't have a lot of money from day one. And I kind of look at other service providers who've done this really, really well. And I draw parallels to a business like AWS. So Amazon Web Services, what they'll do is, for a startup, they will provide $5,000 or $10,000 worth of free credits for the first year. We will then, as founders, will look at that and go, great, this is a great value-adding service. I'm going to start building my entire tech stack using these $5,000 free credit. In the same way that your architecture, your tech stack is really sticky, I think your accountant and your bookkeeper is also a very, very sticky service. So once I've signed up and once I've started consuming that service, it's very unlikely that I'm going to move down the track, because from the engineering perspective, everything is built on AWS. It would take a lot of work to migrate that. From the accounting service, I know my accountant really well now. They understand our business. It would take a lot of effort to move. So I really think, from the accountant's perspective, is knowing that startups probably don't have a lot of money from day one, but if they do want to engage, knowing that in the long term they can be really profitable clients, what is that kind of hook that you can get them in early, knowing that they're probably not going to leave for a long time if you can't get them on your books?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for that. And it's maybe that they have to put a sort of a streamlined package in that they can just roll out to, which are very specifically to the needs of startups, and also potentially working with the sort of the startup hubs, the innovation centers, to access startups and work with them that way, because when it happens huge. so and I guess it's going out there and getting that experience and that knowledge with them.
And I was just going to say, I think on your point with the startup hubs, from my experience as a founder, you're trying to make a lot of decisions really quickly, and often you don't know what you don't know. So you ask for referrals a lot. So, it's not uncommon to go to another startup founder and ask, who's your accountant? Would you refer them? So I feel like once you can kind of get a few, that'll kind of exponentially grow over time as that referral network kicks in.
Yeah, absolutely. And people do love working in, some people do love working in that space. So I want to jump back into talking about DiviPay. Who do you perceive the ideal client is for your solution?
So I think what the great thing about the product is our customer base is very disparate. We work with everyone from the micro business who's just looking to pull apart, personal spending and business spending and just have two different systems. So they're not putting it all through the one card. We work with tradespersons with, 2 to 3 employees to medium-sized digital agencies with 50 staff, all the way up to some rather large companies like Michael Hill Jewelers or Canva that have a few hundred people all using DiviPay. And I think what's really interesting there is businesses in the kind of expense management payments world, they all have the identical problem or set of problems. They're just magnified once you've got 50, 100, 150 people. So the product works really well, whether you're 5 people or 500 people. I would say though, like our sweet spot is any business in that 5 to 50 range. And really, if you're a team or a business who has team members that have to spend money to get their job done. So whether that's you've got a sales team who's out on the road or have to travel, or marketing teams who are, doing spend on social media platforms and whatever it may be, they're the businesses that I think are probably the best fit for us.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for sharing that. How do you go about building in feature requests into DiviPay?
Yeah, so we definitely like to see ourselves as a very product-focused team. So we spend a lot of time talking to our customers, and that I think is one of the single most important things that we can be doing with our time. In terms of the feature request, there's a number of different ways that we handle it. First of all, any feature request that comes in could come in from customer service channel, it could come in from a sales conversation, could come in by talking to our accounting and bookkeeper partners. What we'll do is we'll enter all of that into our database system where we code all of those requests, give them kind of a common tag so we can understand what are the most requested or important features that people are asking for. And then we substitute that with a number of other, different frameworks or methodologies. One which we run every 6 months, sometimes more per year, is a set of customer interviews where we start by asking a very simple question, which is, how disappointed would you be if DiviPay no longer existed? And there's 3 answers. There's not disappointed, somewhat disappointed, or very disappointed. So based on your answer there, we then look at those who said very disappointed. We look at why. What do they love most about the product? And then we double down on those features when we do our next set of iterations and buildings. We then look at those who said somewhat disappointed, and that's kind of where these feature requests come out. So we understand what is the gap to get this person from somewhat disappointed to a very disappointed user. And we start prioritizing and building those feature requests. And then we look at those who said not disappointed, and ultimately they're the ones that, to a degree, we actually ignore because they're most likely actually not our customer. We've got the wrong persona or the wrong customer. So there's a very big gap to get that person to very disappointed. So we kind of double down on those first 2 groups. And then once we've got the feature request, we actually go back to what's called the job to be done framework. So when you talk to someone, they'll often, as feedback, they'll give you the feature that they want. But what kind of sits behind that is a job or a problem that they're looking to solve. So what's really important is they may have given you a feature, but you're not sure if that feature, the way they've described it, is actually the best way to solve that problem. So you try and strip that layer back, kind of one, to using this job to be done framework, where it's all about understanding, what is the situation, what is the motivation, and what is the expected outcome that that person is trying to achieve. And then we'll go through a process of actually exploring all the different ways that we could solve that problem. And then that kind of goes into our development cycle where we MVP it, we go back to those group of users, ask them for feedback, ask them, does this solve your problem, and continue to iterate from there.
It sounds like a lot of your degree, which you said was psychology, I think, and business. You're using a lot of that psychology side of it in how you're actually developing the product roadmap.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's really helpful in understanding why people do what they do and how they do it, and then absolutely you can kind of map that against then this kind of product framework to get the best outcome. Yeah.
It's funny, you don't necessarily think about that when you're dealing with a technical financial product, but of course it's probably extremely important. So what are some apps, software or tools that you can't live without, either at work or personally?
Yeah, so in terms of apps, I'm definitely pretty addicted to work. So Slack and email are very high on my list. Particularly as the team grows, talking to the team, responding to requests and things that they've got. I think there's so many great software tools out there, and the way we kind of like to look at software is, as a small team, what is the FTE cost essentially of not having a tool? There's a lot we could build in-house, but instead there's these great SaaS platforms out there that we can use to streamline things. Xero is obviously a great example of that. For project management, we use Atlassian and that suite in Confluence and Jira. So, we're pretty prolific users of SaaS tools within the business. I think we're a small business our size. We've got something like 50 different software tools that we use, and each of them do a slightly different job. On the personal side, I definitely love Twitter as an app. I've probably tweeted.
That's interesting because your Twitter wasn't very active, or if I picked up the wrong Twitter handle.
No, you're right. I've probably tweeted 2 things in my entire life.
One of them was on Valentine's Day in 2019. I was like, what's happening here?
I don't want to look at my history there, but yeah, I should probably get on the tweeting front. But yeah, I love it for news. I love following interesting people and other startup founders from around the world. Like, I think there's just so much rich content on Twitter, so much life advice that can actually be genuinely helpful from people who have been in our position and done what we're trying to do and done it really well. And they're just kind of providing this stream of consciousness and their thoughts, which is almost like looking around the corner a little bit in terms of foresight and whatever it may be. So yeah, I love kind of looking at Twitter on a pretty regular basis.
That's so interesting. No, I really like Twitter, and you can deep dive and really learn about something or someone on Twitter. And I don't know whether you're aware, but Rod Drury approached me on Twitter to write Xero for Dummies, which I went to write. So I've written about 6 books off the back of him approaching me on Twitter for that. So yeah, so that's kind of cool. But I do think, yeah, and a lot of the guys who are out there are approachable. So
yeah, so
and they will respond to you. So.
I was going to say, you can get life advice and business opportunities by being on Twitter.
Yeah. But that obviously was a surprise for me. But I do think it's that you put out there what you're interested in, and you talk about what you're interested in, and it comes back, and people connect with you based on that. So I'm going to ask you, what are you currently reading apart from Twitter, or what's a book that you'd recommend to someone?
Yeah, so I I try and read as much as I can, time permitting. So I think that always, when I think about, what's a good book, or what's a book I really love, I definitely have recency bias when it comes to books, just based on the last thing I've read. So in terms of the last book I've read that I thought was quite interesting, was actually a book called Humankind. And the book essentially challenges the idea that human beings, as often what we're taught in mainstream media, are by nature, I guess, selfish and governed by self-interest. This book presents a counter-argument that humans are inherently good, and the instinct to cooperate and trust each other has this real evolutionary basis, I think it was a great book, some great science in there. From a business kind of operator book perspective, hands down, the one that does actually stick in my mind is a negotiation book called Never Split the Difference. It's probably the most practical book I've ever read. You can essentially negotiate anything and everything in life. And he was an ex-hostage negotiator for the CIA, I think. And he gives you these tips that you can literally close the book, turn around and use in any circumstance, and they work. It's crazy to see how you can apply it. It just kind of gives you that edge in negotiation.
That's really interesting. I'm pretty sure your tweet was about negotiation.
There you go. I was probably reading that book.
Valentine's Day, and I was like, oh, something happened to him.
Probably negotiating, where we go for dinner or something like that on Valentine's Day.
So you can go and explore it. But thank you for sharing that. That was an interesting one. And a negotiation is one of these horrible things that, yes, you probably do need to learn, because it can be quite confrontational, which some people can cope with and other people can't necessarily cope with. So Trent McLaren wants me to ask you, who's your favourite thought leader?
Of course he does. So, yeah, I mean, Trent joined the team.
You don't need to pick Trent.
My favourite thought leader in accounting, or?
You can. Oh, yeah. He don't think he said accounting. He just said favourite thought leader.
I'm trying to think, like, as I said on Twitter, I follow all these great people who talk about their business experience. There's a company called Mixpanel, which was founded probably 10 years or so ago. Very, very successful company, and the founder of that business has since exited and started another business, and he just kind of almost daily drops these awesome insights about what it's like to scale a business, what you should be thinking of at the different stages. And it just has some, I guess, really raw insights around the challenges that a lot of people don't often talk about. So it's often just one of those pieces of information where you're going through something and you feel like, am I the only one that is experiencing this?
Yeah.
And then you see someone who has been very, very successful, talk about the exact same thing. That's always really comforting. Kind of knows that I'm not alone in this, and this is natural. Yeah,
absolutely. It does help to resonate with people that are going through similar things, and that's one of the things that we're missing out on in not having sort of the conferences. In that you can actually, it's also an opportunity for you to rub shoulders with the other app partners who are actually going through similar types of journeys that you were going through. So Daniel, what is next for you?
Yeah, so in terms of the business, we really do want to become this all-in-one spend management or financial control stack. So in the same way that every business has a technology stack or a marketing stack, we want every business to have a finance stack, and we want DiviPay to be that finance stack. So what does that mean? Well, we want to provide the capability for small business owners and finance teams to run all of their money in, money out transactions via DiviPay, they get one central spot where they have complete visibility over all their payments, and importantly, they get great real-time data that allows them to, I guess, understand from more of a forward-looking perspective how their business is actually tracking and trending. So we're going to bring all of these payment methods together, but we're also going to provide great workflows on top of each one that really streamline a lot of these administrative tasks that I guess traditionally have gone hand in hand with expense management. So today, DiviPay does cards. Most recently, we've added accounts payable or bill payments. In the future, we're going to be adding capabilities like reimbursements, account receivable, payroll, access to credit, these kind of things.
Absolutely. I think there's a very exciting future in that space for you. I'm sure that you will have great success doing that. So is there anything else that you'd like to share with our listeners, and how can they get in touch with you? Should they sort of start attacking that Twitter handle that you're not saying hello to your Twitter handle, or how else should they be getting in touch with you and with DiviPay?
Yeah, so look, I think the best way to get in touch with DiviPay is via our website, divipay.com, DIVIPAY. We are also on all of the socials. You mentioned Trent before. If Trent hasn't popped up in your news feed yet, then I'm sure he will very, very soon.
I think every listener knows who Trent is, so connect with Trent to find out more. So thank you so much, Daniel, for joining me on Cloud Stories. Really appreciate your time and sharing everything with the listeners.
Fantastic. No, thank you so much for having me. It was great.
Awesome. Now, can you just we'll just do both smile at the camera, so I just have a photo for that?
Yeah.
Okay, that's fine. And excellent. So did you see that, and I did want to bring it up in the interview because it's a bit, but Melio Payments just got $250 million in Series A, which brings it to a $3 billion valuation. So that's a similar solution to yours in the US. It's different, but it's from Israel.
What are they called?
Melio, Melio. They're from Israel, but just the money in the market at the moment is insane. So, having this conversation with you, I was like, oh, goodness, I'm going to be speaking with someone who is or is going to become a multimillionaire, because it's just so much. I'm trying to find it. I can't find it now. There's so much money in the market at the moment with people. I'm not sure if you saw it.
It is crazy. It's absolutely crazy. There's a few similar-ish around the world who these companies are all multi-billion-dollar companies. And I think, that's probably the real opportunity for us as well, is around dominating the Australian market and kind of replicating the success that other guys have had in other markets.
Yeah, and I think the banking system in Australia is slightly easier, so hopefully that should be easier for you. And I know that, and again, I didn't want to bring in, but I know that you've got recently Series A funding with ANZ, so hopefully that's a strong bank to have behind you. So hopefully that will be a huge launch pad for you, or not a launch pad, but a huge continue the trajectory that you're on.
Absolutely. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Awesome. Oh, and I've sent you the link, but if you just search Melio and $1 billion.
Crazy. How was the sound? I'm so sorry. There was.
I don't know. It was. I could hear the banging in the background, but the flow was fine, and okay. I'll go through the audio and trim it up. But it is what it is. If it's bad, I'll let you know, and I'll come back to you. But your time is important, and I didn't want to waste it and delay it, etc. So I appreciate it.
No, thank you so much. Apologies. It's quiet all day, and then right when you want to do a podcast, it all kicks off, doesn't it?
Lovely. Yeah, no, I understand. That's fine. But I could hear you strong through the whole thing. Okay.
Great.
Awesome. So thank you so much. Have a great rest of the day. Really appreciate your time.
Thanks, Heather. Appreciate it. Take care.
Bye. Bye. I hope you like listening to that interview with Daniel Kniaz. I found it fascinating hearing about his first taste of entrepreneurial life was his e-commerce modern man sock business. That trick to accessing US education at an Australian price point. His explanation of the process methodology for building in feature requests. And I'll also mention the 2 books that he referenced. One of them was Humankind, A Hopeful History by Rutger Bregman. And I'm actually looking forward to reading that book. And the other one, which was Never Split the Difference, Negotiating as If Your Life Depended on It by Chris Voss. It sounds like another good book to read. I also want to mention I have a strategic partnership and work with the team at DiviPay. You can read more about that if you visit endorsementdisclosure.com. This relationship does not influence my comments during the interview. You've been listening to the Cloud Stories podcast. I encourage you to subscribe, leave a 5-star review on whatever platform you're listening to, so that really helps other people find the podcast. As always, stay up to date with the curated content I'm sharing by signing up to the Accounting Apps newsletter available at heathersmith.com.